Welcome to Manifested Publishers.
How do you do, Lana? I hope you are well, and I take this opportunity once again to welcome you to our today's lesson. We're going to have a lesson in history and government. The topic we are tackling or handling is international relations, and the subtopic that we are going to learn or continue to learn about is the Organization of United Nations. But before we dwell or continue studying about the Organization of the United Nations, it is good that we remind ourselves what we have already learned in our previous lessons. So, if you can remember, we said international relations is the situation where different nations, sovereign, independent nations, come together to interact or associate at different levels. And we mentioned, discussed into detail the different ways in which countries and nations interact. Are you able to remember the ways in which the countries interact? I'm sure you do. We mentioned the different ways they interact, and also we discussed the international organizations that were created to maintain the world peace after the Second World War. The international organizations that were created, one of which we are discussing on this topic is the United Nations. And we said it was an association of independent states that were created or that came together to make sure or to maintain the world peace. So that is what we are learning about. We looked at the aims of the United Nations, which we are referring to as the UN, the aims of the UN. And in our previous or in our last lesson, we started to discuss the organization of the United Nations. We said it has 6 principal organs. Are you able to remember the 6 organs of the United Nations? We said the first one is the General Assembly. And we say the General Assembly brings together all the nations or all the members of the United Nations. And in our previous lesson, as you can remember, we discussed, we learned about the functions of the General Assembly as part of the United Nations. We also asked ourselves and answered the different languages in which that are used as the official languages by the members of the General Assembly. Now, which are the other organs of the United Nations apart from the General Assembly that we discussed in our previous lesson? We said there are 6 of them. So, number 1, we have already discussed the General Assembly. Which are the others? We have the Security Council. Very good. Which other one? We have the Economic and Social Council. Very good. We have the ICJ. ICJ. Can you remember what ICJ stands for? The ICJ. We have the International Court of Justice, right? Yes, which we also refer to as the ICC, the International Criminal Court. Which are the other 2 organs of the United Nations? We have the Secretariat. Very good. We have the Secretariat. And then lastly, we have the Trusteeship Council. Very good, my dear Lana. So those are the 6 organs that form the United Nations. So we have already discussed the General Assembly. So today we're going to look at 2 other organs of the United Nations. Which are they? So we are going to, today, we have already looked at number 1. We have already discussed the General Assembly. That we have already handled. So today, we are going to look at the next one, which is the Security Council. The Security Council as number 2. The Security Council. So, the Security Council is the permanent decision-making organ. It is the permanent decision-making organ. That means it has permanent members. It operates throughout the year. At any time, they make decisions. As opposed to the General Assembly that encompasses all the members of the United Nations. The Security Council is the permanent decision-making organ of the United Nations. It has 15 members. It has 15 members. It encompasses 15 members. Remember, the General Assembly are all the members of the United Nations combined, which we said are around 193 members. So, the Security Council has 15 members. 5 of these members are the permanently placed. They are not elected. They were instituted together with the United Nations. We have the permanent members. Who are these permanent members? We have the United Kingdom, which is also referred to as Britain, right? We have the USA, the United States of America. We have France. We have Russia. We have Russia as the next member, and then we have China. These are the 5 permanent members of the Security Council. They are not elected, or they are not taken away from their positions. They hold those positions permanently. So apart from these 5, we have 10 other members. The other 10 are elected into the Security Council to serve for 2 years. So the next 10 are elected by the General Assembly. Are elected by the General Assembly to serve for a term of 2 years. Do not forget that. They serve for 2-year terms. So after every 2 years, 10 members are elected from among the members of the General Assembly. They are elected to represent those interests. Remember, these are very powerful organ because they make decisions on the day-to-day, right? Decisions concerning the United Nations. So, what are the functions of the Security Council? But before that, there is something essential that I needed to mention. When they are making decisions, when it comes to decision making, let me note that so that you could really remember decision making. When it comes to decision making, 2/3 of these 10 members, right? There has to be 2/3 of the members have to agree. The 2/3 of the members have to agree. And not just that, for a decision to be made, 2/3 of the members have to agree. And then all of the 5, right? All permanent members must also agree. So in case there is a problem or there is a decision to be made, and then let's say, for example, France refuses to accept or to make consensus or to accept the decision that is going to be made, that decision cannot hold. Why? Because according to the charter, for a decision to be made by the Security Council, there has to be at least 2/3 of the members. Those are the 10 elected countries. At least 2/3 of them have to agree. And then all the 5 permanent members who are referred or who have the veto powers, right, have to accept for that decision to be passed or to be adopted by the other members of the United Nations. So that shows how powerful these five nations are as members of the Security Council. So for every decision, note that, my dear learner, they have to accept or they have to agree. If any one of them refuses to agree, that decision cannot go forward or it cannot be accepted. So for any decision to be passed, all the 5, right, have to accept. So that means there has to be consensus always. So it has to be, and as you can just check, we have different nations with different ideologies. So that makes sure that the decisions that are made are acceptable to all the countries. Now, let us look at the functions uh, the functions of the Security Council. The functions of the Security Council. The first one is to investigate potential disputes that could lead to international or the peace internationally to be interfered with. That is the first duty or the function of the Security Council. So they have to investigate any dispute that has arisen or that is just about to come up. So they investigate what are these disputes that are able to bring or to interfere with the world peace. Number 2, they also investigate. They also investigate decision. They investigate situations that interfere with international peace. They investigate situations that may interfere with international peace. So if there is any activity that is happening or any situation that is threatening or is almost to bring the world peace to be interfered with, it is the duty of the Security Council to investigate and make recommendations of what is supposed or the steps that are going to be taken. And then also they recommend procedures. They recommend procedures. They recommend procedures to be taken to resolve disputes. They recommend procedures to be taken to resolve disputes. That is another function of the Security Council. And then number 4, they call upon members. upon members to institute sanctions. They call upon members to institute sanctions. So in case there is one country that is aggressive against another, they call upon the General Assembly, right? Now the members to institute measures or to institute sanctions against such a country. And then number 5, they regulate regulate production and use of weapons. So they regulate production and use of dangerous weapons. An example are the nuclear weapons. So they decide to what extent are the weapons going to be used, to what extent are the nuclear weapons going to be used or produced. And then lastly, they initiate military action. They initiate military action. They decide on the military action to be taken to maintain the world peace. So in case there is any war that is going to be undertaken, it is the duty of the Security Council to decide if that military action is going to be taken. So that is about the Security Council. Let us look now at that is number 3, the ICJ. We say that is the International Criminal, the International Court of Justice. I have to, International Court of Justice. That is the ICJ. Its headquarters is found in Hague, right? Its headquarters is found in Hague, which is in the Netherlands. So this is composed of 15 judges. I mentioned this when you were talking of the General Assembly. 15 judges who make decisions, and the 15 judges are elected by the General Assembly together with the Security Council. So whenever they come together, they decide on the 15 judges that are going to serve in the ICJ. So in case one judge has retired or has left, it is the duty of the General Assembly together with the Security Council to bring on board a new judge, and that is the work, part of the work of the Security Council together with the General Assembly. So this court is run by the 15 judges who top or make decisions. What are the functions? What are their functions? The functions of the ICJ, there are just 3 of them. The first one is to settle border disputes. So in case a country or a nation is quarreling with a neighboring nation concerning their boundaries, it is the duty of the ICJ to dissolve or to amicably bring a conclusion to that dispute. For example, Kenya is having a border dispute with the Somali on the sea, right? That case is being handled in the International Court of Justice. And then they also handle international disputes. They handle international disputes. This involves, for example, fishing areas, right? The waters when countries are fighting against each other on the oceans, where to fish or not to fish, it is the work of the ICJ to decide on such disputes. We have heard of international borders, like what I've also mentioned, Kenya and Somali, right? Concerning the international water boundaries, that is the preserve of the ICJ. They also decide on whenever there is a nuclear test dispute, right? It is the duty of the ICJ to interrogate that issue. And then lastly, they handle human rights violation. They handle human rights violation. They handle human rights violations, or what is also known as crimes against humanity. Crimes against humanity. So any case of mass violation of human rights. For example, in Rwanda, we had the assassinations of we had the Hutu and the Tutsi, right? So the people who are responsible in instigating such quarrels, they are taken to the International Court of Justice. In Kenya, in 2007, just after the election, there were the post-election violence. We had some Kenyans who were taken to this court being charged as having instituted or having trampled over the human rights. We had Uhuru Kenyatta. We had, who was the other person, the accused? We had William Ruto. We also had Sang, right? So these are people who are taken or who are being accused of violating human rights. So in case there is a gross violation of human rights, it is the duty of the International Court of Justice to make sure that such people have been brought to justice. So today we have looked at two other arms or organs of the United Nations. We have looked at the Security Council, and we have also learned about the International Court of Justice. So as we end our lesson, allow me to give you a revision question. A revision question for you as we end our lesson. A revision question. So the question, revision questions. State the functions of the ICJ, the International Criminal Court. So the revision questions for our lesson today are: which are the functions of the Security Council? Number one. Number two, identify the permanent members of the Security Council. And then number three, state the functions of the International Court of Justice. And I'm sure, my dear learner, you are well able to answer those questions. So thank you so much for being part of our history and government lesson today. I've been your teacher, Conan Gakure. Until the next time, bye-bye.